So hello and warmly welcome to 64 episode of SAP on Azure YouTube channel. Today with Robert and Holger, we're talking anything related to SAP on Azure. Today we have some new kids on the blog, Konstantin, and some old kid on the blog, Evren. We were seeing him in the past, right? It was one of thrilling session. They prepare one very interesting topic related to DNS part, the naming resolution on the Azure, and actually created one very interesting and nice white paper. So we will go into a deep dive with two of them. But anyway, like always, let's check the latest news, what was happening actually during the week. And actually, it's not extremely much, but I would say also a few really interesting stuff. So one was, on a SAP, there's an open SAP learning platform. It's for free, offering different free courses, online courses. So this one is basically related to building application on SAP BTP business technology platform, of course, on the Microsoft services. SAP guy plus Holger. So that's the Holger most beloved topic, right? Mm-hmm. And I will make sure that Holger is highly available somehow, right? In the background. From November 10th to December 16th, so it will go basically through the 5 weeks, even actually having some final exam. It is a more for developers and also on the BTP business technology platform, but again, related, I haven't checked. I mean, let's see, it will be interesting to know the details. I just saw some announcement here, but definitely warmly welcome. And it's a free session, so why not to use it, right? Another topic, probably was not the newest blog on the SAP on Azure part. The Cameron, he's the veteran on the SAP on Azure, he wrote it. I really feel it kind of need a little bit to emphasize it because I see from time to time kind of similar issues. It is basically related to the clustering part, where either if you would use Windows cluster and cluster the SQL Server on a Windows cluster, or maybe HANA on Linux with the pacemaker. And what would happen is actually that from time to you would use a load balancer here, and what you would see kind of at least on the Windows part, for example, errors, talking connection forcibly closed, so the connection between the app server and database would be cutted, or something called TCP set, or this 154 error code. So if I would go to net help message, basically says an existing connection is forcibly closed by the remote hosts, right? On the Linux part, typically you would see something number 104 OS message connection reset by peer. The story is, what you could get it here is typically Azure load balancer here has some kind of timeout of 30 minutes, and you have some keep alive parameter to prevent this timeout. If you did not properly configure it, you could see those issues. However, in this specific very case, the reason is even if you configure everything properly, but you use a standard load balancer, you need to use an HA ports. And the reason is basically you will not see this on a basic load balancer, but in a standard load balancer, which you would need in the zones, for example, which is enhanced. But you should use the HA ports, So if you don't have it, even if you properly configure it, you would see those kind of breaking connection, which would have some implication on the application part. Even there is some SAP note available. I've seen those issues just also recently, so I thought it's always good to remind people, if you see something similar, it's just about basically configuration. The SAP documentation is properly done, so feel free also to follow it. It's correctly mentioned, basically everything, right? Now, having said that, we are switching to the main topic and actually to the white paper related to SAP on Azure DNS integration white paper. Again, worked or produced by Konstantin and Evren. Guys, I mean, Evren is an old guy, old kid on the blog, and Konstantin is the new kid on the blog. please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having us today. Yeah, as a new kid, I would like to start. My name is Konstantin Popov. I'm a senior technology specialist for SAP on Azure, and I joined Microsoft in May last year, and actually looking forward for strategic customer engagements in EMEA South region. Prior to Microsoft, I was at SAP working as a cloud architect for SAP HANA Enterprise Cloud.
Cool.
So, having a clue about the cross-system integration and cross-cloud communication. So therefore, that was one of the motivating points to actually start writing this white paper.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Once again, thanks for inviting me, and happy to be here and presenting with my friend and colleague Evren. So Evren, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Thank you. Old kid in the block, Evren Buyruk. I'm happy to be back. Goran and Holger. Holger is not here. Robert, Boban, Goran. So I also want to just say hi to, convey my message to Holger. I'm sure he's going to be watching this later. Yeah. I'm very happy to be back. So this is very exciting for us because Konstantin and I were exchanging thoughts about the overall DNS topic. Is this actually has been brought up by many partners and customers. So we decided to write something which will be actually effective and be used by partners and customers. So basically, when we start to articulate the scenarios and what exactly Azure DNS is, simplified, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper dive into the Azure DNS. And then hopefully at the end of this session, we're going to actually be providing the audience with the right, concise information which they can use on a day-to-day basis in their day-to-day work going forward. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you guys very much for inviting me and Konstantin. We are so happy to be here.
Excellent.
Konstantin, I have one question because I assume that you wrote that document by yourself because it's only 13 pages, because when you ask Evren for something, he always likes to explain everything in tiny detail. Yeah, so correct?
You're almost spot on actually, but no. So that was the shared work. So we collaborated with Evren, and if you would have followed the most descriptive approach, like Evren always has, so then it would have been 130 pages, not 13. And that's true. But yeah, so as we mentioned, we wanted to make it quite consumable for the audience, for partners and customers. So just to really make them all this essence like we could.
Yeah, and then DNS topic is one of important topics, right? The naming and resolution has to work properly, right? And there are different possibilities what you can do, right? Depending on the needs. So I've seen you went really in a deep dive discussion, discussing different scenarios, right?
And also it really complements the overall zero trust security for SAP, the coverage that we done a couple of months ago. And so now, if the audience is really combining those two presentations, it is going to be giving them really good content to actually really understand what Azure is, how SAP runs on Azure, and then what the scenarios are to piece things together. So that's going to be very crucial for the audience today.
Cool. One question, are we planning to, let's say, implement in Azure Sentinel what we learned from your documentation, from your white paper? To be aware that we have a monitoring option to control, is everything done properly?
Exactly. So basically, when we are looking at Azure Sentinel, like there was actually one question that I got from Azure Worldwide Triage, which I'm a member of. And then the question was on the audits using Azure Sentinel, for example. So when we are looking at the Sentinel, we're going to need to look at the overall connectors, because whatever we're going to be connecting and exporting, and it is going to be actually just giving the view to the audience. Basically, DNS, when we are looking at the overall, like the topic DNS, when we're defining the on-premises DNS service in Azure Virtual Network DNS server configuration, then we are considering this to actually, make sure that site-to-site VPN or express route is enabled. Correct, when we're supporting and defining the on-premise DNS service in virtual network. And we do it on the network level or VM level. So any VM or any other connected Azure resources like Azure Sentinel can resolve the DNS names by using the on-premises DNS service.
Yeah,
basically, by the time that the customer actually just deploys Azure Sentinel, use the connectors like the Azure Active Directory logs, for example, as the connector, this is going to be giving the audience a fantastic, not the audience, the customers, of course, our customers and technical people are watching us right now. Anybody can actually just test out the Azure Sentinel when you are looking at exporting the alerts into the Azure Security Center and having the view is going to be the overall beauty of the SIEM solution that customers can actually just enable and onboard on Azure. So, and it is integrated into Azure Monitor, Azure Firewall, which is actually the technology, our PaaS service. It scales automatically. It also provides high availability automatically using the VMSs underneath, and then the standard load balancers in front of them. And then we're looking at the overall picture. When we actually just get started with the slides, it is going to give what we have done. We have actually just captured this DNS topic with the DMZ, Cloud DMZ, which we covered in March, basically speaking about Azure Application Gateway Firewall, Azure Sentinel, and then all the components that actually just make up the entire DMZ topic for the customers.
Okay.
Cool. So
great.
Show us some.
Konstantin, show us the power.
Absolutely. So I think everyone already did quite a very good introduction on the Sentinel, which is supposed to be a kind of a next topic somewhere in the future.
No, that's a weak topic, for everyone. Security, it's weak. I'm high availability, and Holger, it's integration, and Robert is everything
everything else. I don't know is this compliment or what, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. We will see how it works. All right, guys. So let me know when you see the presentation.
We can see it. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we already did our introduction, so I will just skip this slide and go straight to the topic. So just to set the stage, I would like briefly to explain what DNS is, why it is so important for the cross-computer system communication and interconnectivity. So DNS, or domain name system, so in a nutshell, is a phone book of internet. Just to explain it in simple words, it translates human-readable names like Microsoft.com, Facebook, Google, whatever services people consume, to machine-used network addresses, which are standing for IP addresses. It also creates a foundation for all cross-system communication and security basics, because a lot of security elements are based on the DNS names, based on the domains, based on their, for instance, certificates are issued based on the domain names and so on and so forth. So let me quickly show how it works. And so for instance, in this simple example, so we have a person who uses a laptop, and he or she would like to kind of open a Microsoft.com page. So what the web browser will do, on an operating system will do, so it to send a request to a domain name system or domain name servers to resolve Microsoft.com to an IP address. And if a particular DNS server has already this Microsoft.com entry in their table, so it will send the response back to the laptop, and actually a person will be able to reach out via networking, so to a particular website. So this is a very high level and simplified approach. So there is many more going deeper under the hood this process, but this is just explains what it is. And you can imagine that we all know that the internet works based on DNS, and this is one of the essential services on internet. And we also all know what happens when DNS infrastructure doesn't work. So last couple of weeks, we have seen Facebook outage together with Instagram and WhatsApp going down due to the networking related issues coming together with BGP and DNS, when BGP disadvertised all the DNS servers, and as a result, people from their mobile applications, from their laptops, web servers, they just were not able to get the IP address of the Facebook, so therefore it was not reachable. And when we are speaking about the scale of internet, so it's just massive. So how many DNS requests flow every single minute around the globe? So that is just millions and billions. And this sets the importance of DNS not only for internet but for any cross-system communication. Speaking about Azure, so we can think of Azure DNS in two dimensions. The first one is Azure Public DNS, and the second is Azure Private DNS. So Azure Public DNS manages records and provides name resolution for internet-facing domains like Microsoft.com, Google, Facebook, or Tesla, whatsoever. And if I'm not mistaken, so this is the only one service which runs with a 100% SLA.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So, and how it is achieved? So just to explain it briefly, so that all the DNS servers for Azure DNS, so they are spread around the globe, and it leverages more than 61 Azure regions globally, worldwide, and all the entries from those regions are replicated. And in case of there is an outage in one region, so that means nothing. So because there is still 60 plus regions from Azure which can serve DNS records for public addressable domains. And yeah, so this is a cool thing. And unless the whole globe goes down, so the SLA would be 100%. And the second dimension is Azure Private DNS. So this is where we focused on our together with Evren's white paper, because Azure Private DNS and is much more relevant for SAP deployments, and most of the customers who run their SAP estates, they prefer to run it in their premises with a closed environment, with the security in place, with their private networking infrastructure. And for the private networking infrastructure, Azure Private DNS plays an essential role. Couple of things. Yeah, guys, yeah, feel free to add.
So basically, when you say Azure DNS, it's a cloud service. So I mean, before I start to work with a cloud, DNS would be okay. It's a role on a Windows or Linux, you know, and you need to manage it. You know, you need to enable it. You need to manage the operating system. You need to manage those kind of stuff, reboot it, and you have to think about the high availability of those kind of services inside of the operating system. Azure DNS is a cloud service, meaning there is no management.
Managed service.
It's a managed service. In fact, it's a platform as a service for Azure Public DNS.
Exactly, yeah.
And for Azure Private DNS. So there is still a capability. So I will talk about it a little bit later. So to manage your own DNS infrastructure, but yeah, when we are talking about public DNS, it's a pure cloud-based service, and for private DNS, there is a capability to manage your own DNS service.
Right.
Yeah, so this is the topic what we described in our white paper. So with much more details and focused on SAP scenarios, on SAP deployments. And yeah, now further on the slides, we would like to go through Azure Private DNS and a couple of scenarios. So what Azure Private DNS does, so it lives within the virtual network. So in essential, because DNS is a networking service, so it lives, with the simple words, it lives within the Azure virtual network. And it has 3 different options to choose which to go for. So the first one is Azure Provided DNS. The second one is Azure DNS Private Zones, which is platform as a service as well. And the third option is Custom DNS. And with this Custom DNS, so there is a capability to deploy your own DNS infrastructure or connect virtual networks, with your existing already DNS infrastructure. So
from on-premise, you mean?
From on-premise or from whatever.
Or from, if you replicate DNS in cloud, then you connect to that.
Yeah, you can connect to the cloud, or even you can use a third-party providers like Cloudflare, for instance. So that's a full flexibility.
And also one thing to note is that this actually just comes a lot. Customers are asking about private DNS zone. So when they say zone, They're looking at proximity. They're looking at an area, region, if it is like a global, if it is like regional. So basically, when I get that question, I explain it simply. So private DNS zone is used for the name resolution actually inside the virtual network by way of translating the service names to their IP addresses via A records, like A records. Basically, the setup.sh bash script automatically creates the A record in the private DNS zone for the applications, also for other Azure services as well, like web apps, I will say app service environment, and also Azure Application Gateway. It is very important because the importance is actually what exactly it covers, right? If it is global, if it is like regional, it is absolutely not regional. Basically, it is global. Therefore, when you're linking the private DNS zones to corresponding VNets in both regions, we need to have the hub VNets if you're centralizing the DNS zones. Basically, the hub VNet is going to be for the centralization for the DNS zones. Basically, some customers, they don't necessarily see this detail. They go into the solutioning with the partner or, with Microsoft or any cloud provider that they're working. And then after that, they come back to the zone topic. So it is very important to know that it is global, not regional. So you need to centralize it with the hub so that like you can have the benefits of the Azure DNS zone, which is going to make sense so that you can go ahead and just build and scale automatically. And then, efficiently or seamless growth you can actually just do using the private DNS zones.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we already started speaking about the details about all the three options, and this is what I wanted to do within the next 3 slides. So just quickly go a little deeper within the 3 options for Azure Private DNS. And it starts with Azure Provided DNS. So it's very simple. It's deployed out of the box at every single virtual network. So it automatically creates and deletes DNS records with a suffix which is being added by Microsoft Azure. So and this suffix is internal.cloudapp.net. So and there is no way that the customers, Microsoft customers, can control this one or make any interference or change manually A records or create any other records with this Azure provided DNS. It's simple, like it exists always. It's provided by default out of the box. There is no way to control it, no way to actually customize it, no way to manage it. So it's still there. So it and it works as within every single VNet there is a DNS server being deployed, so which has an IP address of 168.63. Blah blah blah. So which is Azure provided DNS server, and it's not routable. It's accessible only from a particular VNet. So therefore, if a customer creates a second VNet, so then another set of DNS servers will be created at another VNet. So and they will be not kind of interconnected between them, even with the VNet peering. So the customers can take advantage of using this Azure provided DNS out of the box. So by deploying SAP from using SAP Cloud Application Library, for instance, because it's just there. So customers can still leverage human readable domain names for virtual machines, or even with Azure provided DNS. So there is a capability to connect virtual machines within a single VNet by using host names. So host names and FQDNs with the prefix provided by Microsoft. So on this diagram, it's explained how it works. So that's quite simple. A request comes to the Azure provided DNS, so then a response, then connectivity established. So quite out of the box.
And also one thing to add, we are also giving flexibility to customers. Basically, Azure provided DNS versus some customers, they want to use their DNS appliance on Azure. So they say, what is the recommendation? Because when a customer really needs to resolve the internal DNS, their internal DNS in Azure, in the Azure tenant, so then they're asking us some recommendations, because we know they actually intend to use their DNS appliance. And then there's the flexibility there. So then we recommend these customers breach their on-premises DNS space with third-party like DDI solutions, Infoblox, BlueCat, if they have any of those things. So then they can bring their DNS appliance into the Azure Virtual Network instead of forwarding the traffic. And some customers, they say, I would like to just, use Azure native solutions. How can I achieve that? I don't want to bring my appliance, and then they don't want to deal with that. They want to have true PaaS service. Then they say, what is a recommendation? So we then say that they can go ahead and just resolve the on-premises DNS namespace that they created, leveraging Azure DNS private zones, which we mentioned, and then forward the traffic to on-premises servers for the resolving names, which are hosted on-premises. This is also treated as forced tunneling for the DNS. Why it is important? Now the customer can go ahead and just resolve this on-premises. Basically, it is going to hit the on-premises for the compliance, for security, for the networking team. They can set assured, the traffic is going to come back, and then it is going to be resolved on-premises. So there's an option that Microsoft provides. So it's not like customer has to have the Azure documented solutions, which are on our documents. We provide them with quite a bit of insight into how to actually just leverage their DNS appliance or use the forwarding, leveraging Azure native solutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Evren, you already touched upon on Azure DNS private zones. So, and here it is, explains a little bit more details what it is. And honestly, so this can be explained as a platform as a service solution for DNS provided by Microsoft to bring customers their own domains and manage their entire DNS structure, both automatically and manually. So what it means, so that the customer can bring their own domain, like contoso.com, to Azure DNS private zone, and all the entries and all the virtual networks which could be registered to this private zone will be creating all the entries, DNS entries within this private zone automatically. So this is a very nice feature, so which allows customers, while creating virtual machines, just create a host name, and then the FQDN will be automatically registered with the private zone, and this FQDN will be assigned to this particular virtual machine or network interface. And one of the beauties here as well, so that all of these DNS entries can be manually entered, altered, or changed, or deleted, or created. So you can create one or more DNS names. You can create aliases. You can create MX actually entries. You can create reverse DNS entries, or even TXT for domain delegation or subdomain delegation, or for the proof of ownership.
So one question: what if I'm a customer and I have on-premise already DNS and now migrating my landscape in Azure, and of course I want to create the Azure DNS private zone? Is there any way that I replicate my records from my existing DNS on-premise directly to Azure DNS private zone, or I need to create everything manually?
So there is a capability actually to upload a CSV file, if I'm not mistaken, to the Azure DNS private zone. So you just simply extract, because so that DNS, in an essence, it's quite simple. Yeah. It's only a match of name and the IP address. So that's
to say key value pairs.
Yeah, key value pairs indeed. So you can create, you can actually export your current DNS entries and import it into the private zones.
Okay,
so
nice.
That works.
But
perfect.
that would means it's not. Is there a sync, or you have to, if there is any change in the records, the new records?
There's no replication service when you have two DNS in replicate scenario. But you can define the forwarder, so you can say, okay, if you cannot find here, you go forward. Okay.
So actually, you see here on the bullet point 3, so that conditional forwarding and zone transferring are not supported yet. So
okay.
Yeah, Goran, what you were mentioning, so this replication, it's actually zone transferring. So Azure private zone doesn't support it right now. And in regards of, in the light of the deployments and recommendations, when to use it, when and how to use private zones. So it's very much usable with a private link, with the private endpoints of other Microsoft services. And also when customer thinks about a target or future implementation as a cloud native application.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting. Yeah, so basically any kind of those additional path stuff, we need a private link to access internally some SAP services via the host name with some name. Basically, that could be resolution could be done in this way. Okay.
Yeah, so you can use the same DNS private zone for any kind of SAP related VNets and also for the services which SAP is going to be integrated. So this is the beauty of that.
And also one scenario I would like to mention, this is something that is not necessarily documented on Azure, but this is what I discovered. Like, we know that there are private endpoints that customers can actually just create. So when a client is creating the private endpoint through Azure portal, we are actually recommending it when we are working with the customers. When we see that they are creating the private endpoint, and then if they're asking me, then I'll say, go ahead and just create yourself a private DNS zone. So then the question becomes, why would I actually just need to have that? Because doing this will ensure that all the VMs on the subnet
are visible.
It is just going to be mapped to access to the private endpoint. There you go. You actually just achieved something. You actually just use the subnetting, which is absolutely needed for multi-segmentation right there through private endpoint. So what happens is that I told the customer, are you trying to, or are you ever going to be using file sync, Azure file sync? So how are you just going to make sure that during the file sync, the traffic is not going to be interrupted? So then it actually, when I was asking this question to my partner's customer, and then they said they're going to be doing the file sync, doing the file moves from an on-premises, and no DNS configuration has been made to forward that request to the Azure private DNS zone, then there will be no traffic going through the private endpoint. There you go, no bottleneck. Basically, when we use the Azure private DNS, it is something that we can use in multiple solutions. It is not necessarily just going to be one solution for the customers SAP. They might be looking at private endpoints and they can be doing something totally different, like web services, for example, anything. And then it is just going to help them reduce that DNS trafficking by disrupting it. Basically, no traffic is just going to flow. And then the file sync is going to go ahead and just do the file transfer, and then nothing is going to be interrupted. All the VMs on the subnet are going to be mapped to that direct private endpoint for the isolation, for the performance, for no more, speed bottleneck or traffic bottleneck. It is going to be achieved. So another good beauty use case on the private zone. Just wanted to add.
What is SLA on Azure DNS Private Zone? Do we have it? We have it probably. We must have it. You're on the mute, Konstantin.
Yeah, thanks. So that's a normal behavior. So actually, we certainly have an SLA on the DNS private zone, but I just cannot recall it from top of my mind.
I will do it in parallel. Don't worry. Just continue.
Yeah. So just to complete the capabilities of DNS private zone and to show you a little bit more about the how the VNets could be assigned or could be registered with the private zones. So they could be registered with only one private zone for auto registration. So that means that any network service being created within the VNet, so it's being registered and the A entry is being created within the private DNS zone. But also,
question: what would happen if you have a private zones deploy and then after this you deploy some service, Azure service?
It will create.
No, sorry. Other way around. You deployed Azure VM, and after you do a enable DNS private zone, will those VMs be also kind of automatically or somehow registered in the DNS private zone after the?
Yeah, Goran, very good question. As far as I remember, so there is no kind of retrofit in this process. So all new instances after their private zone registration creation, so all new instances will be automatically registered, so entries will be created, but the previously existing ones, so I believe they have to be registered manually. Okay. So you have a full flexibility to the private zone, and you need to kind of go
and also, if the customer uses APIPA, which is the automatic private IP addressing, they will be able to set the BGP IP addresses for the virtual network gateway. So it is automatically just going to be added. Nothing is going to be done, on top of that, like recreation anything or adding and registering it.
Yeah. Okay. So what I wanted to mention that the virtual network could be only linked registration to one private zone for this entries auto creation, but also this particular virtual network could be assigned to the different private zones for name resolution. So that means that all the entries which are and all the entities which are created within this private network will be auto-registered for one zone, but those services will be able to resolve actually domain names to IP addresses from other private zones, which they're linked for a resolution. So, and this diagram explains it quite well. So that's, for instance, this virtual network creating all the entries within these private zones. But if a virtual machine would like to resolve for an IP address from, for instance, from this virtual network, so it can also go here to this private zone and get a resolution services from this private zone. From another domain.
And also, speaking of the VNets, this is something that I would like to also highlight. So customers have the options to have standard size VNets and subnets that they can use. Basically, largest /24, medium 26, and then small is 28. So it is good to actually just note here that Azure is always going to reserve 5 IP addresses for each subnet customers are allocating. So the smaller subnets they create, the more IPs they're going to be wasting. So basically, if they don't want to waste that, they have to actually just make sure they're doing the planning accordingly. They can reach out to us. We can definitely just guide them through. So basically, when a client is creating the VNet with like disjoint address spaces and then divide them into, multiple subnets, it's every subnet then is going to have their own one address space. For example, like let's say if I have a VNet with the IP address 10.144.102.0/24, and then let's say that 103.0/24, then I can have subnet, which is going to be /28, which means that I'm going to have 102.0/28. The subnet 2 is going to be 103.16/28. Okay. Basically, if they know that like Azure, Microsoft owns the network, we're going to reserve those 5 IP addresses. So if the customer is going to be creating the smaller subnets, then it is going to they're going to be creating more IPs, and then it is really just going to be waste. Basically, they need to actually just be very mindful of that fact. And also for the VNet address spaces, once we create it, let's say that they want to expand it. Yes, they can. They need to shrink it. They can't. So then they need to open a support ticket. Then we can help them. But then some best practices. So what I am actually recommending for when they go to Azure Documents, networking, IP, and then IP address allocation, what Azure does, what we recommend, what IP addresses Azure uses, so they can actually just go and just allocate accordingly. Because once they're creating the VNet address space, they're going to carving out all those subnets accordingly. Then we're going to be talking about all those like multi-segmentation, which is very important. Again, that is just going to be for the isolation and everything. So Azure DNS, the topic that we are covering here, that over the private zones, is the management service. No need to deploy DNS servers. Yes, everything is just like we are giving the customers all these turnkey solutions, but in the same time, there's some details that they need to be aware of. So they can then use like the example I gave at the onset. Then they can actually just deploy their, DNS appliance, or they can use Azure forwarding. So then they have the options. But once they secure the address space allocation, they can be more liberal in Azure going forward, so they don't need to create any support tickets.
Cool.
Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, very good. So just in a nutshell, to recap about private zones. So private zones allows actually to bring custom domain, like on toso.com. It allows to make and create automatic the entries for all the network resources. It allows to resolve for names across different VNets. And it allows to have a full control and governance of the entries and all the kind of manual interference. So in their auto created entries. So that's the beauty of that. Conditional forwarding and zone transferring are not supported yet. So I've seen that they are kind of in the backlog of the future development, but it's not yet implemented. And so the last and but not least, actually option with the Azure Private DNS. So it's Azure Custom DNS. And this is quite simple. So this is the most flexible solution what our customers can bring. So when features and functions given by Azure provided DNS or Azure private zones so cannot fulfill customer requirements for a little more complex DNS scenarios and architecture, integration with on-premise, integration with existing DNS infrastructure. So for more comprehensive hybrid scenarios, for enhanced security capabilities like DNSSEC. So then most of the customers and most of the enterprise customers use and actually tend to go to Azure Custom DNS. So what it is, so Azure Custom DNS, so it's just a configuration entry, so within every VNet, where our customers can put the IP addresses of the DNS servers, which are responsible for name resolution and all their virtual machines and NICs and all the services which are deployed in the VMs in the VNets within Azure. So we'll get the settings so that in case of name resolution, so please go to this IP address for the DNS service. So on the right hand side you see one of the examples. So when SAP, just a high level overview, SAP systems deployed in the Azure. So a customer deployed a DNS cluster, custom DNS cluster within the same VNet, or it could be within a hub VNet for hub and spoken architecture pattern. So with this custom DNS, the customers can actually reuse of their existing DNS infrastructure, for instance, from their existing landing zone, if it's running already in Azure, or from their existing bind or Active Directory domain services on premise, or even cloud-based DNS, like I mentioned before, Cloudflare. So this is all flexible, all customized, and there is nothing for VNet configuration rather than just pointing to an IP address of the DNS server. And just an L3 connectivity should exist from particular VNet to reach out to the DNS servers, and that's mainly it. So this is used for most of the complex and hybrid scenarios.
And also, before we go further, I would like to also just advertise one networking solutions. We have Azure Firewall, the topic that we covered before. So basically, Azure Firewall, as we know, is a cloud service, and then is an offering which is allowing our customers to centrally govern and log all the application and the network traffic flows. So now here's a new feature, which is actually custom DNS. This just came to preview, it actually is allowing any customer to configure the Azure firewall to use their own DNS server while they provide that separation between their on-premises and service name resolution. This wasn't available before, so now it has been integrated. And also what has been announced is DNS proxy. It is allowing all the outbound DNS queries to be processed by Azure Firewall now. So it means that it is going to now initiate a new DNS resolution query to a custom DNS server or Azure DNS. So now they have an option. They can even just do the resolution query either on the custom DNS server or Azure DNS. So this is very important as when we're talking about FQDN filtering in a network rule, it is very important to have this feature. Basically, now customers can go ahead and just do this resolution either way. It used to be one way, but now it is either way. They can do it custom DNS server and Azure DNS. The importance of the custom DNS server is that because it is their own rules that they actually own. Basically, it is allowing these customers the option to configure the Azure firewall, which is a PaaS service, so that they can use their own DNS server, and then they achieve the separation between their environment and then the service name resolution, which is something that actually was demanded. Now it is available. And also I wanted to add this as Azure DNS, custom DNS. This is also integrated into the Azure firewall right now,
cool.
Which is a PaaS service.
Yeah. So one question is in similar direction because, you know, as Gordon mentioned in the beginning, you know, DNS is just one service or a service on Windows in this, when we are talking about the Azure Active Directory domain services, for example. So when can I, if, you know, if I deploy that server, I will just replicate what I have from Active Directory on premise. I just want to install virtual machine on Azure and replicate, actually have a sync between these two servers. So can I, this DNS part, replace with Azure Private Zone, or can I use Azure Active Directory domain services with this Azure Private Zone, or I need always to have custom DNS in that scenario?
So in this scenario, Robert, so as DNS Private Zone, as I mentioned, so doesn't support replication or zone transferring right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So therefore, you would need to, from the virtual network perspective, so you would need to use a custom DNS. But this custom DNS could also be Azure Active Directory domain service. So you can actually just tie this all together and make everything from the cloud, and even having domain services as a PaaS solution, so to say.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problems. Okay, Jen, so let's just quickly have a look on the few examples and the scenarios, what we mentioned within the white paper, and just make it a little bit more relevant for SAP, because we are here to speak about SAP, and we really went deeper into the networking and DNS here. So let's just quickly have a look on a few examples. And the scenario number one, which we explained, so is how to make kind of a quick start using Microsoft Cloud and solutions like SAP Cloud Application Library to deploy very fast within a couple of hours, so your SAP environment. So this doesn't necessarily mean so that you would need to have all of the landing zone deployed, so all the kind of DNS infrastructure integrated. So this comes out of the box. And with this out-of-the-box solution, so it leverages Azure provided DNS by default. But then once you created this landscape from CAL, for instance, then you can link it to Azure Private Zone. So and then you can kind of extend it and make more usable for your environments. So this is a very good fit for this kind of quick and fast deployments. And for solutions like Sandbox, a training system, or any kind of temporary SAP environments. Speaking about Azure Private Zones, so this could be, as I said, extended on top of the Azure provided DNS and after the creation. So and also Azure Private DNS, private zones, so suits very well for also greenfield implementation and brownfield implementation with a holistic cloud native approach deployment. So with a strategy when the customer is planning to move and migrate as much as possible solutions into the cloud to make the interconnectivity and integration between the cloud services within the cloud. So then it makes sense to simplify your operation efforts just to decommission this kind of legacy DNS maintenance operations and so on, so forth. So and just use DNS private zones for all the resources, for private endpoints, and also for creating links to public services via exposing private endpoints. So, Evren, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, you actually just covered everything, so I don't have anything on the slide.
Very good. Yeah, so let's just quickly go through the second scenario. Second scenario is one of their most interesting things. So where our enterprise customers leverage our reference architecture, which is called from the network perspective, which is called hub and spoke. So and on the middle of the slide here you see the hub VNet, which actually serves as a kind of a central connectivity option for any integration with any external world. Would it be on-premise connectivity by having ExpressRoute or VPN or any other connections, or this could be also going to the internet. And here within this hub VNet, as Evren mentioned, so this is a central and very crucial part for the IT security as well. So this normally our customers would like to deploy here services like Azure DDoS to protect again DDoS attacks. So then Azure Firewall with all of its latest and greatest features, even including private DNS proxy. So Azure Application Gateway also could be a gateway into the external world. So to internet by exposing some endpoints from SAP systems. So for integrating with some multi-cloud connectivity and any direct access from end users to the SAP systems, for instance. And with this hub and spoke environment, normally customers, the SAP customers segregate different workloads by their nature. So by having production in a separate VNet, so then quality assurance, development, training system. So that all depends on a particular customer scenario, on a particular customer requirements and security aspects. But anyway, so with leveraging hub and spoke architecture and custom DNS, and having, for instance, an enterprise customer who is just starting a journey for migrating their SAP workloads and non-SAP workloads into the cloud. So there is a great opportunity to leverage custom DNS and integrate those VNets. Would it be spokes having SAP systems and non-SAP systems by pointing out to the same existing DNS infrastructure and just start from there. In the future, when customers make more and more native cloud applications or migrating even more into their Azure cloud, so they can, for instance, replace their on-premise DNS with their private managed with private zones, or with a custom DNS, for instance, deploying here Azure Active Directory domain services. So that's all the flexibility here. And we are seeing a lot of customers leveraging this hub and spoke architecture, connecting and segregating SAP into separate VNets and leveraging on-premise DNS infrastructure still then.
And I would say probably what I see is also on a customer side, something very typical to see at least today for the productive enterprise load, so to say, right?
Yeah, so that was one of their points, what we wanted to mention in the white paper, just to highlight so where our customers stand right now.
And also one thing that I would like to add is you might remember that this was one of the slides that something I used in the previous session. It was something like this. So then the question then becomes, like, customers are asking, of course, that they have the right to ask, how they can, achieve end-to-end encryption in network encryption. So this actually has been coming. So I just want to cover, since we have this slide. So basically, what Microsoft does by using Azure Firewall and then Azure Application Gateway and also DDoS, we are covering the brute force attacks in layer 4, and then we are covering also HTTPS traffic. But some customers, because of their compliance, they're asking us, what is the way, the networking level that we can do the double encryption or very tight encryption? So then what I'm telling this customer is that they're going to need to have 2 gateways, is they will need to set up site-to-site VPN over ExpressRoute. So now it is available on Azure. Basically, customers can do IPsec over ExpressRoute, but we have to distinguish the difference between the VPN gateway and ExpressRoute connectivity. So now the question becomes, if I have VPN gateway and then site-to-site connectivity, why do I need to have ExpressRoute connectivity? So then the short answer to that will be then, it is the underlay network, ExpressRoute is, while site-to-site is the overlay network. Basically, they're going to need to advertise different prefixes over ExpressRoute and VPN. Otherwise, the traffic is always going to bypass the VPN tunnel, and then the unencrypted traffic will flow over the ExpressRoute circuit. It is just going to be undermining the importance of site-to-site over ExpressRoute, which means it's very like rule of thumb that I just say, when a customer is asking, all you need to do is that you need to advertise the /32 or any predefined subnet, which will belong to the VPN appliance on your network that is going to be terminating the IPsec tunnel over ExpressRoute, and advertise your local network over VPN gateway. So that with this, ExpressRoute is going to learn of that host IP address, and then they're going to also need to know that from the Microsoft perspective, they will receive that full VNet address space, and any peered VNet with gateway transit is going to be enabled over both ExpressRoute and VPN. So basically, what customer is covering with this scenario, which I actually just said, is end-to-end encryption. If a client is having any kind of concerns around moving to Azure, and then the traffic is unencrypted, it is absolutely covered by Azure, by Microsoft, by just doing the site-to-site over ExpressRoute. Then inside the hub, which we see, Azure Bastion, Azure Firewall, Azure Application Gateway, and then Azure DDoS is actually complementing the overall, the DMZ, actually. DMZ, Cloud DMZ, which is the logical 2 or 3 layer. But now the importance of this, which I would like to highlight, Azure Firewall and Azure Application Gateway, is you see that they're side by side. Some customers, they might want to find out the source IP address. And if they have Azure Application Gateway only, they won't be able to get the source IP address. But if they have Azure Firewall, using the route tables in between, they are going to be able to verify the source IP address. This is going to be covering one of the compliance requirements of, I will say, 80–85% of customers. So the importance of this is that when a client's traffic is hitting the hub, it is the central point for their centralization for all the DNS, and all the traffic inside the Azure backbone. So then the question becomes, how is then the traffic going to be encrypted? So then there's going to be the TLS. Is going to be another, of course, topic to actually just discuss about. But when Konstantin came up with this slide, I couldn't even just believe he read my mind. Because how are we going to be now covering, complementing the overall DNS topic with Azure network rules and tools? It is going to make sense. This is the slide. If anybody has any questions, they can reach out to us. Azure is safe, is secure, and then, but we cannot say it is going to be 100% secure. We need to use tools to actually just make it secure, like immutable storage, for example, for the backups. So you can actually just have multi-user authorization. You can actually have multiple components on top. So now this slide shows how we are doing the routing, how we are actually just providing layer 3, 4, layer 7 protection, and how we are providing customers with brute force attack protection by using DDoS standard, which provides 45 terabit of protection with an SLA guarantee. And now one thing that I would like to highlight about the importance of Azure on this, when there is DDoS attacks, customer is not going to pay for any egress charges, which means it's going to be response time. It is just going to traffic going back. The going back or leaving Azure backbone, egress charge is not going to be customer needs to worry about. They're not going to pay for it. Azure is just going to credit back to their account automatically. They don't need to do anything. Cool. Just wanted to add this because this is a very important slide.
Yeah, it's security is always overlapping there with the
exactly,
of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, actually, as we are speaking about DNS, so and this is just one of the network services. So it plays an essential role, but all of the other aspects of what we are highlighting, and we are trying to explain it here. Okay, let's go to the next one. Yeah, with this scenario, so we wanted to highlight the integration with one of the most common services, what SAP provides from their side, and this could be under umbrella of different names. So this could be an SAP RISE, STE, or HANA Enterprise Cloud. So and for some of the customers globally use an opportunity to get a fully managed services provided by SAP. And all of those the services could be deployed on Azure. So important to mention that you see, I will take my laser pointer. You see that SAP will provide fully managed services from Azure subscription, which SAP owns, and from VNets, which SAP owns. So that is important to mention. So that the customers, SAP customers or Azure customers, so they don't have any kind of control on the SAP environment and the SAP provided service for SAP applications. So when this picture comes together, so then an ultimate question is how to make the cross-system communication between different services. So this question pops up, and we know a little bit about SAP provided networking design, and actually SAP uses custom DNS for their services, and they deploy a cluster or 2 DNS servers within their infrastructure, within every subscription what they provide services from. So that means we kind of planning our customers' designs or partner solutions. So we need to keep it in mind, so that and we need to deal with the fact that SAP uses custom DNS based on Linux, and the standard solution is to provide a DNS zone transfer. So it's a kind of a replication from SAP side, DNS replication from SAP side to somewhere. So, and this somewhere in this particular example is going to be a DNS server, cluster solution, or any kind of solution, also custom, which can receive a replication from SAP tenant, from SAP subscription. So, and this is called DNS zone transfer. And with this zone transfer, this DNS server, which is deployed in a hub VNet, is capable to make a name resolution for SAP applications provided by RISE, PCE, or CAC. And so there is also a common scenario that complementing RISE solutions or PCE solutions, customers also would like to deploy some non-SAP applications within Azure, or even SAP applications which have to speak to each other with SAP. So, and
but they are customers subscription, right? Which is an SAP hack.
Yeah, and those are customer subscriptions. So they have a full flexibility, but still they have to deal with the fact so that there is a DNS server running here, and they have to respect this and integrate it somehow. Okay. So then the customers also have full flexibility here, and actually having those DNS servers deployed in hub VNet. So our customers can integrate SAP RISE and their own VNets and subscriptions with these DNS servers, and having a centralized option for DNS name resolution service sitting within the hub VNet. Also, the customers can extend it by making a replication back to on-premise or make a conditional forwarding depending on certain kind of subdomains or delegated domains to SAP or to another spokes.
So there is possibility of communication between any parties, whatever they are, right?
Yeah. And important to mention that this is only one of the potential design options. So SAP also can support some conditional forwarding, which is not reflected here on this slide. But this is a kind of a separate topic to discuss how to make a particular DNS integration solution for a particular customer scenario.
Cool. Excellent. I think we are on the end, if I'm not wrong.
Very good.
And Evren.
Great. I mean, it's interesting. You know, we are promised to discuss about DNS, but it's like always a networking topic. You know, there's so many services or topics which are correlated. Cross each other and with each other. That is simply not possible to discuss just isolated about something, because you need to somehow say, hey, how that's going in respect to left and right and so on.
That's why I'm known to actually have very extended presentations. So I'm so glad Konstantin actually just took the lead. Otherwise, as you guys know, everything is just so joined. It is interconnected. One topic, you just end up, okay, where was I? You just forget about it because you need to just cover basic topics before you speak about the real topic of the presentation. But
and what I have seen many times that actually if customer is taking so naively, let's say this networking topic, they will face some other constraints in Azure. They will not use Azure in a flexible way. They will hit some boundaries, and then actually they will use the Azure like a modern hosting. That's all, And they will have challenges to integrate with other services and so on. So I think it's very, very good that we have a session like this one. Because it's really basic of.
And for me, it's this hub hack. The third scenario is really eyes opener, because when I think, okay, you have one customer and one hack tenant, but there's another customer having another hack tenant. So, which means hosted also parallelly on the HANA Enterprise Cloud. So again, you need security to separate them, and also internally to integrate them, so to say, right? So cool. I mean,
actually, so that was the reason. So because we were getting too much questions about how to integrate, so this and that partner scenario, which is also deployed on Azure, but not integrated. So how to make the native integration between this and that. So we decided to come up with those examples.
Great, guys. So super interesting topic. So thank you for your time, and it was as always fun, Evren. And.
It is always great to see you guys. You guys are masters in the SAP space, technology. We love you.
So we are masters of disasters.
As always, we will deliver pizza later.
Masters of disasters. We could use this name. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. I learned also some new stuff, I have to admit. So it's really, I'm using this also as a learning session for myself, or upgrading to a higher level. So really appreciate it. And talk to you.
Thanks for having us.
And hope to have you soon again next time as well.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Goodbye.